Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about XXX Return of Xander Cage. The XXX franchise has never been, I guess, the best remembered of Vin Diesel's filmography, but I think to understand what he's doing with XXX, you have to understand the Vin Diesel of then and now. And I think the Vin Diesel of the original XXX they were still ridiculous, stupid blockbusters, but they weren't ones that were owning it the way people view him now in the Fast and Furious films, which he is a producer on and one of kind of the gatekeepers of. And it's starting with Fast 5, you got these ridiculously silly and knowingly so big blockbuster films that aim for the ridiculousness, started by director Justin Lin. Those films have been amazingly successful. Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6 and Furious 7 have all done crazy amounts of business. And you'd think Vin Diesel, because he's kind of they're kind of ensemble films, but he's sort of the star of those films, that Vin Diesel would be able to start another franchise like people thought back in the early 2000s. That really hasn't been the case. Riddick did fine or whatever. The Last Witch Hunter didn't really take off. And I think XXX Return of Xander Cage is probably the closest attempt at replicating what he did in the Fast and Furious films in a new franchise. And it actually gets pretty close. It's probably the kind of stupid, ridiculous, dumb action movie that you'd want in January, and it's almost perfect at being a stupid, dumb action movie in January. Most action movies in January are kind of like the thing like, oh man, I can't wait to watch that scene in the trailer, and then you see that scene in the trailer, and it's sandwiched between a bunch of crap that no one would ever put in any trailer. Like, did you ever see Parker with Jason Statham? And XXX Return of Xander Cage seems to find a way to do its ridiculous dumbness and have all the scenes in the trailer, but also have a lot more fun in between. Doing a similar ensemble thing around Vin Diesel, doing probably more of a global kind of a movie like the Fast and Furious films, and kind of almost replicating and mixing a Fast and Furious film around his character of Xander Cage. And it actually works out to be a really fun, dumb action movie that you'd really want from the XXX films. It gives you exactly what you want from it, and there's a kind of glory in Vin Diesel really understanding the kind of star and the kind of action vehicle people really want from him and owning it as much as he does. Just like XXX or Xander Cage or whatever would drink a Red Bull down real fast and then jump off a tower and ski down a bunch of mountains and tell those suits they should shut up because he's the real outlaw in town. XXX knows what it is and doesn't really give a fuck if you like it or not, because it's a damn good, stupid, fun action movie released in January at a time when most of them are just stupid, dumb, and unbearable. Return of Xander Cage is stupid and fun in all the right places. Now, XXX Return of Xander Cage has a dumb plot, but I'm going to say it anyway, even though nobody cares. Xander Cage, everyone thought was dead, but he's not. So after they find that Samuel L. Jackson's character of Gibbons or something is dead, sorta, they try to get Xander Cage back to stop this evil box called Pandora's Box that can just drop satellites out of the sky and decide where they land, even though I don't think a lot of the math and stuff doesn't work, but it's kind of dumb, so like whatever. But yeah, so they're trying to find out who has this Pandora's Box thing, because it can basically like do anything with the internet and stuff. And so they have to get this box back, and they send Xander Cage, and they're going to give him a bunch of stuffy shirt suits, soldier guys or whatever, and he's like, nah, I'm too extreme for that. I drink Monster Energy drinks. So he gets his own team of all sorts of cool people like Ruby Rose from Orange is the New Black and Nina Dobrev and a couple other people I'm forgetting, but he gets them all together to fight this other team who are actually former XXX people played by Donnie Yen and Tony Jaa and this girl whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce because I will sound terrible and I'm sorry, but she seemed good in it also, and trying to fight them to get back Pandora's Box from getting in their hands as they try to do evil things with it, or so they're told by the government or the government official played by Toni Collette. Much like what happened with the Fast and Furious films, this is kind of a complete reboot of the franchise and making it into something stupid and ridiculous, giving it new life when you thought it probably couldn't. And as XXX is like, we understand why they're bringing it back, but it was never quite loved. I think Fast and Furious at one time was, but XXX kind of went from XXX, didn't get its Too Fast, Too Furious, and went right to its Tokyo Drift with the Ice Cube movie. XXX Return of Xander Cage tries to kind of course correct it and understand what works about a Vin Diesel vehicle. I don't think think it cares as much as being an extreme athlete movie. It sort of does and has fun with that, but it's trying to play more into the ridiculous and having a team, much like the Fast and Furious films. And I think that really works for it. Vin Diesel works better as an ensemble, I think. And it's kind of weird because he's not playing Dom Toretto from the Fast and Furious films. He's playing someone who has much more charisma and smart alecky and is like, I'm extreme, I don't need this stuff from you people, you don't get it like I do and stuff. And I don't know. He's actually fairly charismatic. I sort of understand him as a star. Like, it seems like with the Fast and Furious films, he kind of like fell ass backwards into a billion-dollar franchise some of the times, the way he acts. I think he works well within the franchise, but you don't really get like why people thought he was a big star at one time. And this is like he's using that kind of star power people thought he had in the early 2000s and mixing it with his actual box office power that he has now and understanding what works. This is very much a foreign box office kind of movie. It shows a lot about globalization, but it really works for it as a multi-ethnic cast, as a really diverse cast. Everyone has a very distinct personality as well. You can tell this is from a guy who produced all the ridiculous Fast and Furious films, and it seems to play to the strengths of those films and play the strengths of just like watching a ridiculous action movie, know it's a ridiculous action movie, and having fun with it, having those moments where you're like, oh my god, are you serious? And although this movie does not have the budget of ridiculousness to have the real ridiculousness the Fast and Furious movies have, it does have some moments, particularly like him running out of a plane while it explodes. It's kind of more of the kind of low renter version of Fast and Furious, but with Vin Diesel as an extreme dude or whatever. Also, with the rebooting of it, though he has some great villains and stuff, he surrounds himself with cooler younger people, particularly Ruby Rose and Nina Dobrev and Chris Wu, who I think is like a boy band guy or something. I don't really know. It's kind of a smart idea, basically bring young blood into the franchise to give it new life. It actually works. I think Ruby Rose is pretty good. Although she's doing a lot of action movies, she's really good in this. And he plays well and plays well against everyone. And it kind of ups the craziness of it because you're like, wow, look at this like crazy group of people. How are they working together? Who would have thought some hobbits and trolls and an elf would be traveling together? What he also understands is getting other action stars and stars who have their own names, maybe lower level ones who can't necessarily open a movie, but if you have them in the film, they can show off and bring their own fan bases in. It's kind of like an Expendables mentality, but on a smaller scale. Fast and Furious films actually sort of work in an Expendable casting-wise sort of a way, and this works in that as well. You have Donnie Yen right off of Rogue One, and he shows his real star charisma, not as good as Rogue One. Everyone who's in this is better somewhere else, but they're still having fun with it. And you can tell the actors are always having fun. It's like every day there was a party, or everyone was in a good mood most of the time. He also does the similar thing with, the Ice Cube cameos Blown, which if you're in this franchise once, you can never leave. And seeing the two XXXs side by side was like, oh my god, this is like the only way you can do that kind of Fast and Furious film thing in this franchise, because like there's no one else really. And I think in some ways it plays more to the kind of dumb audience who both would like a XXX film and the people who ironically like Fast and Furious films, both simultaneously and very well. I don't think this franchise still will never really be Fast and Furious, mostly because of the money, also because it doesn't have Ludacris and Tyrese and everybody like that, but I also don't think you can really have a second ridiculous franchise, but as a kind of lower rent ridiculous dumb action movie that gets it's a ridiculous dumb action movie, this actually really works. It's funny that Vin Diesel kind of missed the whole like bad movies being made to be bad movies thing, which kind of devolved into Sharknado and kind of ended up doing like, let's make ridiculous action movies in this self-aware way, and it really kind of works for XXX. It almost works on a parody level. It's like really close to going over parody with his extreme sports nonsense and all that stuff, and having all these people, their backstories. They play almost like in a sort of like, I guess, cartoony way, but people who don't understand cartoon, like kind of a Saturday morning action cartoon sort of way, but it knows it's doing it, but it's like sort of good at it. But you're like, man, you are like 2 steps away from like this being MacGruber in so many places. It's like kind of ridiculous. I kind of love that about it. If you want to see a ridiculous dumb action film or buy a bootleg from a guy on the subway, I think Return of Xander Cage is really good at doing that. It's almost like in all their meetings they're like, yeah, but could we make this dumber? A lot of January films are the things that like studios just are releasing to kind of just get out and contractually just be done with. And XXX, Return of Xander Cage, kind of plays like a franchise that they're like, well, I guess we should do this because it's like, he's a huge star and maybe this one will work. It sort of works in that way that a studio just wants to get this out to like be like, well, we should just see, I guess, and it sort of shows that Vin Diesel has more faith in his franchises and works in that kind of self-promotion producer way that I think has worked so well for his other films, and that's what's worked so well for Return Return of Xander Cage is being ridiculous and dumb and stupid. And as long as he doesn't like try to like really achieve much of anything with them, he gets a great fun group of young actors, everyone from Ruby Rose to Nina Dobrev to even like, how is Toni Collette in this? I think that's weird. To Tony Jaa, to Chris Wu, to Donnie Yen. I mean, it's just like he has a crazy insane cast, but they're all like doing ridiculous things. You see him ride a motorcycle under a wave, which previously like suddenly has like a thing so he can ride the motorcycle on water and all this stuff. It's like such a silly dumb movie because of crazy world events and whatnot. It's the perfect brand of escapism, and Vin's come to give it to us once again, just like he has with Fast and the Furious films. It's kind of a miracle he hasn't made the kind of escapist crap that people hate, like the Transformers films. He makes the ridiculous crap that even film critics like for whatever reason, and he seems to be very good at it, and this shows kind of the wonder of him. I think this would be a fine example in that. Would I watch it over any Fast and Furious movie? Probably, maybe like 4. Nobody really likes 4, so maybe 4. I'd watch this, maybe, probably not. And it kind of doesn't even really get into early 2000s nostalgia. It's more about him making his Fast 5 for the XXX franchise, and it might end up being the better of the XXX films if I sort of remember the other two, which I don't at all. XXX Return of Xander Cage is the dumb action movie that you want from it, and that's all it really is. It shows that Vin Diesel understands kind of star movie that you always wanted from him, and he's failed to give to you other than the Fast and Furious films. And that's what Return of Xander Cage is. It's showing the promise that he has of making really dumb shit. And as long as Vin Diesel understands how to make really dumb shit with a diverse cast and having an ensemble and basically just doing Fast and Furious but with XXX in it and shit, then I think we'll all be fine with it. This was a nice holdover until whatever the 8th one is. I had a much better time watching this than I've had watching any of his other stuff, which like I don't really remember Riddick. I don't really consider many of his other side films, many of his other non-Fast and Furious films, which I don't think many people do, actually shows the answer like how would a non-Fast and Furious Vin Diesel movie work? And the answer is it would work exactly like Fast and Furious and be dumb and stupid, but with a lesser budget, and because he's hoping it would sort of work, and he'll populate it with promising enough actors that he'll lift it up better than it probably should. Having like, especially like Donnie Yen really works for this movie, and Toni Collette and everyone like that. He really knows how to just like throw everything in the kitchen sink at an action movie. Hope he can prop it up and make a successful and entertaining film. And I don't know if it's successful yet, but it sure as hell is dumb and entertaining. And at least Vin Diesel understands that. And as long as he can understand that, I'd love to see more movies like XXX Return of Xander Cage. So if you have seen XXX Return of Xander Cage and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.